Hey, how is it going? Chris here from 99thcloud.com. In this video I will be showing you how to set up a new WordPress instance using Amazon Lightsail and migrate an existing site. Hey and welcome back. If you are a user without IT experience, then you might not even have been aware that it is possible to create a WordPress instance using Amazon Web Services. Or you might have been under the impression that you will have to do everything manually. However, AWS has a service called Amazon Lightsail, with which it is very easy to create a new WordPress instance. In fact, it is as easy as with other providers such as SiteGround or GoDaddy. It can get, however, a little bit more difficult when it comes to domain name configuration and the setup of HTTPS. And this is where this video comes in, to give you a step-by-step guide on what you need to do to get your WordPress site up and running with Amazon for a lower cost than with other providers. In this tutorial we will go through 4 steps in order to set up your new WordPress instance and migrate a potentially existing site. In step number 1, we will create a new WordPress instance using Amazon Lightsail. In step number 2, we will migrate the site. In step number 3, we will do the domain name configuration. And in step number 4, we will be setting up HTTPS. So this video will be geared to people that already have an existing WordPress site but want to migrate their site to Amazon Lightsail. But if you are setting up a new site, the steps will be quite similar, and I will give you some hints on how to register a new domain with Amazon as well. Okay, so let's create our new WordPress instance on AWS Lightsail. Let's head to the AWS Web Console and log in. You can find the link in the description below this video. Then use the search bar and search for the Lightsail service. Once on the page, click on the Create Instance button to create a new instance. First, you want to choose the location of your instance. It makes sense to choose a location close to where your target audience is. If your audience is in your country, for example, you would choose the closest location to your country. If you target the US audience, you would choose a location in the US. You don't have to change the availability zone. This is more for advanced users that have specific needs. Now you can choose your instance image. You can either use a Linux or Unix instance or a Windows instance. By default it will be AWS Linux. I'd recommend keeping this as is unless you have specific needs and know what you are doing. Under Select the Blueprint, we can choose what we want to install. I'd recommend choosing WordPress, which is certified by Bitnami, as it is a pretty standard setup. You could also choose WordPress on Nginx or WordPress multi-site, but this is only recommended when you know what you are doing. Under Optional, we won't use SSH key pairs as AWS provides a built-in terminal. Opening up access through SSH from the outside world isn't recommended due to security reasons. We do, however, want to enable automatic snapshots. By enabling this feature, daily snapshots of the instance will be created and stored for a week. This will add a little more cost, but it will be easy to restore your instance if anything should happen. You can choose the time of the day when you want the snapshot to be created. We will keep this as is. As you can see, you can start with a small instance that will only cost you $350 a month, which results in $42 a year and will give you plenty of performance and storage space. But as your site grows over time, you'll be able to upgrade based on your requirements. If you have a high traffic site, you might have to choose a bigger plan. But for my site, the $350 plan will be sufficient. You need to give your instance a unique name. I will use the host name as the unique name. Now you can click on the Create Instance button. Once the instance is created, you will see it on the Instances tab. Let's test if we can access the site by copying the IP address and pasting it into the browser. It might not work straight after the instance creation, so give it a few minutes and then try again. After a while it should work and you should be able to see your site. In order to log into the administrative section, we will need to retrieve the password. In order to retrieve the password, click on the Terminal button. Once the terminal is open, you can type the following command to retrieve the password. Equipped with the password, you can now log in to the WP-admin section using the user called user and the password. Once logged in, you should see the WordPress dashboard. Now that our WordPress site is up and running, the next step is to create a static IP address. By default, AWS will assign a dynamic IP address to your instance, which means that if the server is rebooted, you might end up with a different IP address. This is of course not the behavior we want, and this is why we need a static IP, an IP address that is permanent. This is free and will not cost you anything additional. On the Lightsail Instances page, click on the Networking tab to open the Networking section. Then click on the Create Static IP button. Choose the same location as your instance is in. In my case, it's US East 1 in Virginia. Next, you can now choose the instance you want to attach the IP to. Choose your instance. Then give your static IP address a unique name. I'll use the host name with -IP at the end. Click the Create button to create the static IP. So now that the static IP is assigned to our WordPress instance, we can test if we can open the site using the static IP address. And with this, we have completed the setup of the WordPress instance. In order to migrate the full WordPress site, including the images, plugins, templates, and so on, to another site, we can use a plugin called WP Vivid Backup. The features we will use are available for free. So, as we will work with two sites now, I will be talking about the source site, which is the site from where we want to copy the data, and I will talk about the target site, which is our new WordPress instance to where we want to transfer the data. The WP Vivid plugin needs to be installed on both sites, so let's do that now. Log in to the WordPress admin page on the source site and click on Plugins in the left-hand navigation panel, and then click on the Add New button. Then on the right hand side at the top, enter WP Vivid Backup into the search field. A list of plugins will appear and you should see the Backup and Migration WP Vivid plugin. Once you see it, click on the Install Now and then on the Activate button. Let's now do the same on the target site. Again, click on Plugins in the left-hand navigation panel and then click on the Add New button. Again, we will enter WP Vivid Backup into the search field. We'll click on Install Now and then again on the Activate button. Let's stay on the target site and let's open up the configuration section of the WP Vivid plugin. Then click on the Key tab. You'll now create a key that can be used to migrate your site. Set the key will expire in pull down to 2 hours or more depending on the size of your site. Then click the Generate button. Once generated, copy the key. On the source WordPress site, click on the WP Vivid Backup link as well. Then click on the Auto Migration tab. Paste the copied key into the text field at the top and click the Save button. We want to transfer the database and the files, so keep this option selected. Then click the Clone, then Transfer button. This will create a zip file of all the data, including the database, images, templates, and plugins, and will then attempt to transfer the zip file over to the target site. This might take a while and you might experience some messages where the connection will be lost and re-established. But in the end, it should have worked and copied the zip file successfully to your target WordPress server. The last step is to restore the site on the target server. Click on the WP Vivid Backup link and click on the Backup and Restore tab. Now, before continuing with the next step, take note that all data on the target site will be completely and unrecoverably, sorry for that, overwritten. You will be logged out of the site and will have to log in with your login credentials that were configured on the source site. Additionally, I had some strange behavior with pictures which weren't loading in the Gutenberg editor after the transfer, and I had to click on each of the pictures and resize them to make them visible again. So make sure you check this before you delete your old site. Okay, so if you are ready, click on the Scan, Uploaded Backup or Receive Backup button. You should now see the backup file appear. Now you can click on the Restore link to the right-hand side to restore your site on the destination server. And with this step completed, if you now reload the new page, you should see that your full site is available on your Amazon Lightsail WordPress site. Okay, so this next step will be most likely the most complicated step. It's configuring your domain name. Let me give you a short overview first on how the domain name system is working in general. You can skip this step if you already know how it works. If you enter a domain name, for example www.yourdomain.com in your browser and hit the Enter key, Your computer will make a connection to the name servers of your ISP and ask them if they know where the web server for this domain is located. If it is the first connection to this site, the ISP's name servers won't know the answer and will delegate the request to the so-called root name servers. The root name servers know at which registrar the domain is configured and will delegate the request to the name servers of the registrar. In the domain name configuration at the registrar, the name servers are configured that contain the so-called zone, which is a record that does the mapping from the domain names to the IP addresses. So the name servers of the registrar will delegate the request to the name servers the zone record is located on, which are usually the name servers at your hosting provider. And on these name servers there will be a mapping that indicates to which IP address www.yourdomain.com is pointing, and your browser will then load the website from this IP address. The name servers of your ISP will create a local copy of the zone record and will store it locally. So if you request this website again, the name servers of your ISP will be able to delegate the request onto the right web server directly without actually asking the root servers where the zone is located, because they have now a local copy of this zone. And this means you will have a faster speed to load the website. Now, the zone record has a so-called time to live time configured. This can be set to 5 minutes or to several hours. The time to live, also called TTL, will indicate when the name servers at the ISP should update their local record. So if you do a change in the zone file, it might take between 5 minutes or several hours before the record at your ISP is updated, and you might therefore wonder why your changes aren't reflected immediately when loading the site. It's because the zone record at your ISP isn't updated with the changes yet. So the zone record at your ISP might not be on the latest version yet, and it will take some time, which means the time set in the TTL, until the record is being updated at your ISP. You can shorten the TTL time before upgrading, but we will not cover this in this tutorial. The AWS service which manages DNS zone records is called Route 53. AWS is also a registrar, which means that you can also register new domains with the Route 53 service. As I have registered the domain already with a registrar called Moniker, I will only create the zone record on the AWS name servers and will then configure the domain name at Moniker to point to the name servers on AWS. Click on the AWS button on the top navigation bar to go back to the AWS services page. Then use the search bar to search for Route 53. If you would want to register a new domain name, you could click on the Register Domain button and register your new domain. But as I have a domain name already, I will use the Hosted Zones link in the panel on the left-hand side to create a zone record only. On the Hosted Zones page, click on the Create Hosted Zone button. Under the domain name, we will add our domain name and keep the rest as is. Click on the Create Hosted Zone button. You'll now see that the zone has been created with some default configuration. Within the NS section, you can see on which name servers the zone is available, and within the SOA section, there is some more information about the zone itself, including the TTL that we've covered earlier. We now need to configure the IP address of the WordPress instance. In my case, I want that thailifestyle.asia and www.thailifestyle.asia point to the IP address 54.145.79.152, the static IP address of the WordPress instance. In order to do that, we will click the Create Record button. First, we will create the mapping that lets thailifestyle.asia point to the IP address. We will use a so-called A record for this, which stands for alias, and the value of an alias will always be an IP address. Leave the record name empty. Then click on the Create Records button. Next, we will define that www.thailifestyle.com is pointing to the same IP address. So click on the Create Record again. This time, however, we will use a CNAME as record type. CNAME stands for canonical name, and with it we can create a mapping that says that www.thailifestyle.asia points to thailifestyle.asia. The reason we do this is that if we change the web server, we only need to change the IP address in one record and not in both records, which minimizes the administration efforts. So add www as record name, then add CNAME as record type, and in my case I'll add thailifestyle.asia, but you'll need to add your domain name here. And with this we have successfully configured our zone. If you have registered a new domain name with AWS, you were most likely guided through the process, and you should now be able to use the domain name to connect to your website. However, if you've only created the zone as I did in this tutorial, you will need to make sure that you configure your host name at your registrar to use the AWS nameservers on which we just have configured this zone. We have already learned that the name servers on which the zone is available are visible in the NS section of the zone record. So we can copy the domain names from there. Then in the domain name settings of your registrar, you should see a link that says name server or something similar. And you should then see some fields where you can add the name servers. You should specify at least 2 name servers for redundancy reasons, but the more the better. Which ones you choose usually doesn't matter that much. Once the new name servers are added, you might have to wait for a while again until the changes are reflected. Okay, now that we've configured our domain name, we will go back to the AWS Web Console, to the Lightsail overview page, where we can see our instance, and then we will click on the Terminal button. When you load the website, there will be an annoying banner on the bottom right. We want to remove this banner. So in the terminal, let's type the command to remove the banner. Okay, now in this last step we will configure HTTPS. You will only be able to execute the last step when your domain name is pointing to the new WordPress instance on AWS Lightsail. Otherwise, you'll get an error. So run the command to create the SSL certificate. The tool might tell you that an updated version is available. Type Y and enter to install it. Once done, you will then have to rerun the bncert tool command. The tool will then show domain list. Type all the domain names you want SSL configured for with a space. In our case, it will be thailifestyle.asia and www.thailifestyle.asia. Next, the tool will ask you if you want to enable redirection from HTTP to HTTPS. Type Y and then enter. Next, it will ask you if you want to enable non-www to www redirection. Type N here and enter. Next, it will ask you if you want www to non-www redirection. Also type N here and enter. Then it will ask you to agree to the changes. Type Y here and enter. If everything worked, it will now ask you for your email address. So enter it and click enter. The last step is to agree to the Let's Encrypt subscriber agreement. Type Y here and enter. This will restart the web server, and if you now go onto the website, it should redirect you to HTTPS and should show you that the site is secure. Okay, this brings us to the end of this tutorial, and I hope it worked for you and you have now a WordPress instance running on AWS. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing if you want to see more content like this. Have a good one and see you in the next video.